Your college football game day has come early.
Goes down the field for Gesicki, goes up high. He's got get away from the clock speed, and the ball is free. Woo! What a hit! You got barbecue back there.
From underdog triumphs to powerhouse showdowns, we've got your winning playbook covered. It's BetQLU with Chris Mack, RJ Choppy, and John Martin, presented by BetMGM, the sports book born in Vegas. Download the app today. Please gamble responsibly.
Another weekend comes and goes in the college football world, and we're left looking around going, what the hell just happened? Twice in the case of last weekend's games, we'll get into the 50,000-foot view of the SEC and everything that comes with it in just a couple minutes here, and how it affects the college football playoff on BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin, I'm Chris Mack. You know we're here for you every Friday night and Saturday morning across the BetQL network, getting you ready for that weekend slate of games inside your Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. Just search BetQLU. And, of course, right there on your screen as well. If you choose to watch us on the Odyssey Sports channel on YouTube, that's where you can find us. Let's start with the big upsets in the SEC, gentlemen, last weekend. And we could save our thoughts on the conference as a whole and the SEC being where it is at this point, this early in the season. We're barely at the halfway point already without an undefeated team because Bama loses their second game of the season up in Knoxville last weekend, losing 24-17. Dylan Sampson goes off, 139 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. And the Vols defense stood tall really most of the night. Jalen Milroe picked twice. And then down in Austin, Georgia walks in and doesn't just beat the Longhorns, Choppy, whoops the Longhorns to the tune of 30-15, and it didn't even feel that close most of the night. The turnovers by the Longhorns, the early turnovers by Georgia, I think, actually are where that game turned because Texas didn't capitalize on them. And then Texas turning the ball over themselves and Georgia capitalizing on those short fields, leading 23-0, and then just sort of coasting from there. So which one of these teams is in a tougher spot now? Obviously, I shouldn't ask that question. Bama's in a tougher spot here. They can't afford to lose again. But how much did this affect both of these teams, RJ?
Well, it's going to affect Bama a lot, obviously, because you said they still have no cushion now. They have absolutely no cushion. They can't lose again. Texas can lose again. Texas can go. They can lose. The problem is that A&M is going to be in a position when they go to A&M this year. Like A&M might be a one-loss team, and if they win that game, I mean, you never know how the rest of the conference is going to shake. I mean, they might knock out Texas out. So, I think Texas obviously. They have another loss in them that they can play with. Alabama doesn't. That's the bottom line. This was a much more crucial loss for the Tide because they put themselves in a spot where they've got to win out, and it's not the easiest slate that they have. So it's a tough spot for them, no doubt.
John, I mean, both of these teams didn't want to lose. Obviously, Georgia, Texas, as RJ just mentioned, could afford the loss. But both of them now go off to games where they're heavily favored this weekend. Texas by 18 and a half at Vanderbilt, who's been surprising to this point, and Bama laying 16 and a half, granted at home against a Missouri team that's been underwhelming. Are these good bounce back spots for these teams? Would you bet either one of these two, given the points they're laying this weekend?
I would not bet Texas because this Vandy team just feels like it has something, certainly enough to keep it within that number of 18 and a half, 19. I just feel like they have shown an ability to score with pretty much anybody. So I really don't love that spot for Texas. Alabama's catching a big break here. I mean, that's why this number is, 16 and a half, as you said, at BetMGM. No Cook, no RB1, no WR2. I mean, Missouri was very fortunate to beat Auburn. It took a miracle. to do that. I mean, this is a different set of circumstances altogether, and those guys aren't even going to play anyway. So, of the two, I would definitely be more inclined to play Bama. You know, I don't know, you know, what Missouri plans to do with Pine at quarterback. It just feels like a tough ask. But with that being said, I don't love this Bama defense. I mean, we really have to reprogram our brains. You know, this is not Nick Saban coach Alabama football anymore.
Right.
So, you know, I think in 2022, I would probably already be on Alabama in this spot. But, you know, because this is a different coach who may or may not really even be a fit long term, I'm not really as excited about it. But of the two spots, I definitely like Bama's situation more.
Choppy, it's interesting. John mentioned this isn't the Saban tide, obviously.
No.
This is the earliest they've had 2 losses since Saban's first year in Tuscaloosa, 2007. So clearly the Bama program under Kalen DeBoer is going through, I don't know if you want to call it adjustments, growing pains, whatever. Texas, on the other hand, I think, I don't know, is Vandy on the road a spot where you go, all right, we're the Longhorns, we reset here and we get back on it? Or is this, I can't call it a letdown spot because you just got your ass whooped at home in front of the world, but is it a spot where maybe you think you can waltz into Nashville and just kind of handle things easily and maybe end up getting caught again?
And nobody goes to Nashville and gets anything done easily against Vandy. Not against this Vandy team. There's something, like John said, there's something different about Vandy. I think that, you know, Bama is in a Bama's trailed in a lot of their games this year. That is not Bama. Like, there's something going on there. They're not 16 points better than Air. There's no chance I would take them and the 16.5 points. I'm on both of the dogs in this game, all over them. I love that. I love the dogs in both of these games. I think these are tough spots for both teams. I could absolutely see Vandy beating Texas. I mean, at least keeping it close, not beating Texas, but keeping it very, very close and scaring the you-know-what out of them. I just don't know what to think of Bama. I really don't. Like, this is not a tip. I mean, they are breaking out. They got their coach out there talking about fadeaway jumpers at the on a QB sneaks, and then they're worried about getting their players to meetings 5 and 10 minutes early, and tucking their shirts in, and the fans are still worried about DeBoer's collared shirt versus his pullover. What is going on? These Bama fans. What's that?
I was going to say real quick, this is why we can't let Tennessee have anything, because Tennessee gets one win, and look how RJ's talking, man. He's like Bama ain't 16 points better than Air. You know, this is why we can't let Tennessee football have anything. Because
I told you last week, and you guys should thank me. I said, don't let Texas beat Georgia. You'll never hear the end of it. And I should have just said, don't let us beat Alabama. You'll never hear the end of it either. But yeah, I mean, but let's be serious. Like, you know, Bama has gotten – Nick Saban gave them – and this would happen – this is going to happen to Georgia and Kirby Smart. It happens to every school. It gave them like an unrealistic bar to hit. Like, nobody in the history of the sport had hit that. And they did with Nick Saban. Like, now it's just – they're just another great program. Clemson's going through this. We've seen every school – Oklahoma – we've seen every school go through this. And it happens at Bama, and the world ends.
So what's interesting now is the CFP fallout from all of this, and we haven't had an official CFP selection show yet. Like, we'll start to get a rankings show in a couple of weeks. But just based on the AP poll right now and the way things shake out, we would be talking about no Bama, and we'd be talking about just 4 SEC teams in the playoff. In that world, just 4 SEC teams in the playoff, it opens up some weird doors here, John. For example, the latest projected bracket from ESPN, again, based on the current AP poll, has not just Boise State in as the 12 seed, going to visit 5 seed Penn State. It's got Iowa State, because they are the highest ranked Big 12 team right now, as the 4 seed. It's also got BYU sneaking in. At the expense of Notre Dame, who is another team we'll get to in a couple minutes because a huge game this weekend for them in New Jersey. But if the SEC does not get 5 teams in, we start to see how it opens things up. It's Miami and Clemson from the ACC, maybe a different second team based on how the rest of the season shakes out. But all of a sudden you start to see names like BYU pop up in these projected brackets, and maybe you start to find some value on some other teams. BYU, for example, right now, plus 220 at BetMGM to make the playoff.
Yeah, look, let's be clear about it. If the SEC only gets 4 teams in, it'll be the last year they only get 4 teams in, right? We're going right back to the table, and we're going to make sure we get those automatic bids every single year. If BYU's getting in over them, even though that's technically a power league, I suppose in 2024. I mean, we're pretty clear on how Greg Sankey feels the playoff should go here. But yeah, I mean, BYU has certainly been the surprise, one of the big surprises of the season. And when you start talking about going there to play football, man, that's among the most difficult places to go and win. So yeah, I just feel like it will be an SEC revolt, though, even if it's deserved, if they don't get 5 teams in.
Yeah, I want to get into the SEC picture in a little more detail later, but Choppy, I mean, you've got, again, all of these teams picking each other off. It's opening doors. Like we talked about Indiana last week. Indiana looked like an absolute wagon last week. Now they're going to be without their quarterback this week. We'll get into that in a couple minutes when we talk about Indiana, Washington, where game day is going this weekend. But plus 140 to make the playoff. I mean, Curt Cignetti's walked in there and completely changed everything.
He has. And the I win Google me quote is going to live in infamy if they go to the playoff. It's going to be one of the great just lay them on the table quotes you've ever seen from a head coach. I mean, the guy did that. I mean, nobody had ever heard of this guy a year ago. Was that James Madison? Is that like the poor man's George Mason? Are we just finding founding fathers to name schools after? Is that what we're doing here? Is that what that was?
Yes.
It made no like for him to go to Indiana, a school that never does anything, and do this. It's nothing short of remarkable. And yeah, they're an absolute tremendous bet, assuming health, to make the playoff, because the Big Ten is going to get their 4 teams. The Big Ten, the SEC are going to get that, and I find it hard to believe that someone's sneaking BYU in. I just find it because if they, especially if they lose this weekend, because they are different away from home.
I have a hard time believing, too, the way we saw the Big 12 kind of cannibalize itself early on in the conference season, that they find a second team in. But we'll see if the ACC starts to cannibalize itself over the next couple of weeks. Some big games lined up near the top of that conference. Maybe they're the one that's only getting 1 team in. The Big 12 steals the second bid. Maybe both of them only get 1 team in. They're single bid leagues like we talked about way back at the end of August when we first started looking at this season. And Notre Dame is in there. And we've got 4 Big Tens. And we've got 4 SECs. And the group of 5. I mean, you add it up real quick, you get to 12 teams pretty quickly. We still don't know. Mountain West is up for grabs and probably will be throughout the remainder of the season as well, because I imagine you'll end up getting a rematch in the Mountain West championship game between Boise and UNLV. But it all starts to the first card that gets pulled out that causes the whole house to sort of tumble down is that 5th SEC team not getting in. And that's, at least after this week, John, looks like it could be a reality.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I mean, that's the beauty of this format, man. I mean, that's why we were so, that's why we all advocated for it, because look at what it creates, right? It creates so many openings for other teams that would have never dreamed of having. I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine a time where we didn't have 12 teams, buying. It's like, what the hell were we doing in November? Right. Like, we're talking about 4 teams, basically, like this is just so much better for the sport. And, we're going to have years, guys, where a champion emerges that we never even considered. I mean, that's going to happen. There's going to be a team that gets in that we didn't think about. whether it's like a Navy or something like that, like they got a chance. They're live. We're going to have a champ that we didn't consider. So, yeah, I mean, I think all of this is just really good for the sport of college football. It's just kind of crazy how long they resisted it.
Yeah, Reese Davis last weekend on Game Day basically said something to the extent of, a year ago at this time or during the 4-team system, we would have been down to talking about maybe 7 or 8 teams right now.
Yeah.
You look at that graphic they post every weekend with the chance to reach the college football playoff. There are currently 28 teams with at least a 5% chance to make the playoff. There are a bunch of teams worth talking about and a bunch of games worth talking about, and we will get to all of them, starting with one that I don't think anybody probably would have predicted was going to be a big game coming into the season, being played in New Jersey, Notre Dame, Navy. That's next right here on BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker.
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
Sports handicapper Rob Brown.
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
Cycling all the top plays.
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
And one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3.
Oh! Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game! We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game! We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
And we've got a lot of games to get to today. Certainly some big ones in the Big Ten. A massive game in the SEC. Is it kind of an elimination game for those two teams? Maybe. And we'll look at the SEC picture in whole in just a couple of minutes alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin. I'm Chris Mack. This is BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Every weekend we're here for you, getting you ready for college football's biggest games, looking at as much of the slate as we can. And this one, I don't think, when I sit down and look at the schedule, even a few weeks ahead of time, let alone at the beginning of the year, John, I've never looked at a Notre Dame-Navy game and said, that's one we'll definitely be talking about. But here we are. It is massive. 12 noon kickoff on ABC Saturday in East Rutherford at MetLife Stadium. Number 12 Fighting Irish laying 12.5 to 13.5, depending on where you find it, against the number 24 Navy Midshipmen, who are almost a full half century removed from a 7-0 start, which is what they're looking for. They haven't ranked in 5 years. Notre Dame has been up and down, right? Like we've seen that very defensive-oriented, and their defense has showed up in a lot of different ways. They're allowing fewer than 12 points per game, which is 5th best in the country. Top 15 in more than a handful of other defensive categories. But a couple things, their D-line is banged up, and they're facing this Navy offense that is ridiculously efficient. With Blake Horvath, who can get the ball into the end zone with his legs as much as his arms. And without their own offense, really. Riley Leonard can still score himself on the ground, but the rest of the Irish offense still struggling and lacking, I think. 12.5 feels like too much for me here. Maybe I'm buying into the Navy hype, and there has been a lot. They really haven't played anybody, but I think this is going to be a really low-scoring ball game. And I guess obviously I could see Notre Dame winning, John, but I think it's going to be tighter than 12.5.
Yeah, well, I respect the fact that you threw the question to me as the Group of 5 representative.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm going to say the whole damn network. All right.
Yeah.
I talk about Group of 5 when it ain't even cool. Like we're not even talking about like the last spot in the playoff. I'm talking about just a random Saturday little Troy, Arkansas State action.
Nobody knows Middle Tennessee and Texas San Antonio like John Martin.
Hey, I bet MTSU the other week on Friday or whatever it was when they played Kennesaw State. Saddest game I've ever seen, at any rate. Look, what worries me about Navy, and you could actually find some 14s out there, fellas. What worries me about Navy is that as great as they have looked, and they have, and it's a new Navy, and it's, as we've talked about, this offense is as innovative as they have probably ever had, and Horvath is having as good a year at that position as anybody, honestly. they have not played anybody near Notre Dame's capabilities defensively. I mean, what are we saying? Memphis? I mean, and Memphis' defense is 70th in the country. So I think what I worry about with Navy is Notre Dame is definitely like this isn't like a 3-5 Navy team. This is a Navy team that's ranked in the top 25, and like there are no secrets about it. Everybody in the country knows how good it is. Everybody knows how different the offense is. And so I think this is one where, Notre Dame is probably not coming in sleepwalking. And I'm not laying 14, to be clear, but I am not betting Navy for that reason because I'm just not sure how they're going to handle the step up in competition. I think you said it. I think under is not bad at 51.5. I mean, we see Notre Dame play these ugly games. And if I'm saying that there's going to be a step up in defense that Navy's going to see, which I believe, then I can see this one definitely being pretty low scoring. So I do actually lean under 51.5 before I would play Navy in this one.
I'm looking for a card to revoke your mid-major card on that one. Okay,
I got to be honest, RJ. I got to keep it 100.
I don't have a card to revoke, but look, I actually like Navy here. I would consider them money line. I'm not a Notre Dame believer. I also want to buy into the Navy story. So this is why I would not bet this for that reason because I can't separate. But plus 420 is a hell of a number. It's a hell of a number for a team that is basically run over stop it. But that's basically run over everybody, okay? I mean, they literally have just dominated every team they played. Yes, they have not played great competition, but good teams win and great teams cover. And not only do they win, they cover every game. It's a neutral site, right? Those things get a little bit weird for both teams. If this was at South Bend, I'm absolutely taking Notre Dame in a neutral field. I really do like Navy and the points.
What's interesting is the last time they played in East Rutherford, I want to say it was 2010, and I think Navy won that game straight up. So if you buy into that neutral field thing, and look, Notre Dame's used to playing all over the place. They've played this game in particular in places like San Diego, and I think they may have met in Ireland once. So look, Notre Dame is used to playing everywhere. Navy is used to bouncing around as well, but this is as good as Navy's been in a long time. To that end, if Navy wins this game somehow, if they cash that 420 that Choppy is so high on, Navy's CFP probability would go up to 30%. Falls down to 6 if they lose. Notre Dame, conversely, if they lose, playoff chances fall down to 11%. If they win, up to 60%. They are right there on that borderline, Notre Dame, where they cannot where they cannot afford another loss. Certainly not to a Group of 5 team. Sorry, John. There are 3 Big Ten games that I think are worth touching on, but I don't know how much we want to go into each one of these, knowing that we've got a finite amount of time. It's kind of like a Big Ten choose-your-own-adventure this weekend. We've got Oregon at home with a huge spread, more than 3 touchdowns, against an Illinois team that's been really feisty this year, like beat Nebraska on the road, put a scare into Penn State. We've got Indiana, who we talked about a few moments ago, ranked 13th in the country, their best start in half a century, but Curtis Rourke is not going to play most likely, hosting the team that played in the national championship game last year, but is totally different from that team that played in the national championship game last year in Washington. And then we've got Penn State at Wisconsin, which would seem like it could be a minefield for a team that just barely skated by their chinny chin chin out in L.A. against the Trojans a couple weeks ago. But they're coming off a bye, and I don't think Penn State's lost in Madison in close to a decade. So any of these 3 games, Choppy, tickle your fancy, as it were. Penn State laying 6.5 on the road at Madison. I mentioned Oregon laying 3 touchdowns against Illinois at Autzen Stadium, and you got the Hoosiers laying a touchdown to Washington.
I'm tempted on Indiana with or without with the quarterback. Yeah. Washington has not played well away from home, and they're going to a new conference and having these these games. We talked about teams going out west, teams going east, though. I mean, that's not the easiest thing in the world either. I mean, that's still a pretty decent road trip for them. But they have not played well when they've left the Pacific Northwest. So if I was going to take a team, I would be much more apt to take Indiana and the points. I thought about Penn State. I'm just happy. I want Penn State to play somebody. I'm sorry, no offense, but I just want them to play somebody this year. They will eventually. They got
Ohio State next weekend. Just relax.
They do. But Wisconsin, since their little blip against USC and Alabama, have basically rolled everybody. So that may be a team that's a tricky spot. So I would probably stay away from that one. I kind of am on Indiana here.
Yeah, I mean, Rutgers, who else have they beaten? Northwestern, I think. You're right. Wisconsin has gotten it together to a certain extent. Not just gotten it together to a certain extent. They have been dominant. Purdue, Rutgers, and Northwestern, they've beaten in their last three by a combined score of like 117-16. 6 touchdowns on the ground for Walker. Braden Locke, since he's come in to take over at quarterback, has looked pretty good. But against better teams, they have looked like a second-tier Big Ten program, right? Like you mentioned some of the numbers they put up earlier this year or were allowing teams to put up. So Penn State laying 6.5. I don't know if I'm all over it, but it doesn't necessarily – it wouldn't give me a ton of concern. Indiana, I do wonder, John, about that Indiana-Washington game because – this seems like the spot. I know they handled themselves just fine in the second half last week. Taven Jackson is familiar with the offense, even if it's a new coaching staff. He feels comfortable going in there. But there's something about just upsetting the apple cart, so to speak. Like, the reason Curt Cignetti went out and got Curtis Rourke and a bunch of the guys that he brought in through the portal was because he was looking for experienced guys who stay on the field. Well, this is the first instance of Indiana having to deal with a major injury, and I wonder if that's the speed bump that maybe, like I said, upsets the apple cart just enough. Look, Indiana could win this game, and I wouldn't be shocked because, like what Choppy said of, the Western teams, the new teams in the Big Ten, and their track record going east, but I don't know if I'm in a rush to bet Indiana laying a touchdown.
Or are you in a rush to bet Washington getting a touchdown? I mean, what are we doing, man?
At 9 a.m.
Yeah,
at 9 a.m. Pacific time.
I 100% understand where you're coming from on Indiana. I don't have a bet on this game, but what I would say is if you told me, "Hey, John, you gotta have a slip on it," I would bet Indiana. I just would. I mean, I like betting coaches who have those kinds of mentality. I like laying points, especially, right? Because if you're going to cover a number like that, you got to have an aggressive coach. You got to have a coach that wants to run it up and dial it up, and that's what this guy does every single week. And I think he's kind of sick enough, and I mean sick enough in a positive way, to where he's going to have this backup quarterback in. Everybody's kind of attributing the success of the offense to Rourke. He's going to want to show that it's not just about one player. It's about a system and a culture. I think this is one where they kind of rally around that. And I think that's why you're not getting that much of a discount. I mean, Rourke is one of the best quarterbacks in college football, and we're still having to lay a touchdown here. I mean, seems kind of outrageous, but that's a credit to, what Indiana is. And Nebraska's a top 25 defense, guys. I mean, and they picked the number. They covered the total on their own. They went over the total on their own. I mean, so I don't really like this Washington team. They're fine, but I just feel like Indiana's a cut above, backup quarterback or not. And again, I don't have a bet on it, but if I had to have one, it would definitely be Indiana.
Yeah, I don't think I'll have a bet on it either, but you make a good point about Cignetti and just the mentality. And I think that's one of those weird things you see in like the special teams rankings of these two teams, right? Washington is one of the worst in the country. Indiana is one of the best in the country. That's one of those weird intangible things. I know it's schematic once you're on the field and between the lines, but it's also got an intangible feel to it that you could see this thing being a tight ball game and then Indiana blocks a punt, for instance, and takes over.
I mean, James Madison, he's throwing up 28 in the fourth quarter. I mean, that's what this guy does, So I just wouldn't want to be on the side of Washington here. I don't think they're very good anyway.
What about the other two, John? Choppy and I touched on Penn State going to Madison a little bit, laying 6.5. And then I mentioned Illinois has been frisky. Or this is the first time Oregon's been ranked number 1. I didn't realize this. Oregon hadn't been ranked number 1 in 12 years. That's wild to me. That does not compute because the program has been on top for so long, or been good for so long, if not great. Conversely, it's Illinois' first game is, against an AP number 1 since they beat Ohio State 17 years ago. Yeah. Dylan Gabriel's wildly efficient, but like there's something about a Bielema team on the road that just makes it dirty and gritty enough that, I don't know, Oregon beats them by 2 touchdowns, but it's still not enough to cover.
Yeah, I think, I could be just completely stupid here, but I look at that number, that total, and I was like, why? This feels short to me. Yeah. I mean, Illinois has shown, I think about that Nebraska game. They went to OT. I mean, Altmaier can get out of the pocket a little bit. Like you said, feisty. I just feel like there will be points in this game. Illinois certainly put up some stinkers as well, but I just kind of like points in this game. I think it'll be pretty offensive oriented, and I don't know. I don't have anything on the side, but I do like the over at 54.5. I think both quarterbacks can do enough to get this over.
Illinois finally got an identity. It only took them 100 years to get one, but they get Brett Bielema in there, and I mean he's building what he had at Wisconsin. He's just building the same kind of, or trying to build a very similar program. He's a good coach. There's nothing wrong with him. He's a fine coach. They're just outmanned. At the end of the day, they're just outmanned here. I'm kind of with John, and I don't usually like playing overs, but this might be one that I could see going. Although if you look at Illinois' games, they're generally, when they played good teams, they've been in the 28 to 35 range. Oregon
kept it uncomfortably close. Yeah, you're right. Ducks can blow up the scoreboard at any point. Just 2 teams in the SEC with perfect conference records, and they meet in College Station on Saturday night. We preview LSU and A&M and take a 50,000-foot view of the rest of the conference as well. Next, right here on BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah?
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker.
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
Sports handicapper Rob Brown.
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
Cycling all the top plays.
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
And one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3. Oh!
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game! We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game! We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
And we get you ready for what has become a conference of chaos, the SEC, in just a moment here on BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Welcome back in as we are live coast to coast on the BetQL network. Wherever you may be in the world, you know you can download us in podcast form, especially in that free Odyssey app, AUDACY, alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin. We're also on YouTube. Just search the Odyssey Sports channel. You can watch the show. And we'll get into the, like I said, the 50,000-foot view of the SEC in just a couple of minutes. Also get you our best bets before we get out of here for this weekend's games. But let's start with the only two teams left in the SEC who have perfect conference records, because it's been chaos otherwise. Everybody's lost at least once, if not twice. In fact, the SEC, I want to say, now has as many as 8 teams, I think, who have 2 or fewer losses. Again, we'll get into the conference as a whole, but number 8 LSU visiting number 14 Texas A&M Saturday night. Garrett Nussmeier has sort of quietly put things back together for LSU, Choppy. 5 300-yard passing games. He's leading the SEC with 18 touchdowns. And LSU is 8th in the country, over 322 passing yards per game. The defense on the other side, creating lots of pressure. So maybe this is a spot where they force Connor Wegman into some mistakes. But A&M, for what it's worth, their defense is going to push back just as much, if not more. They only blitz about 16% of the time, but they're only allowing a 54% completion rate. It's classic Mike Elko defense. Generate organic, natural pressure, and then create your own chaos. Third down defense is 16th best in the country, and they'll happily grind the game down to a halt on offense. So a chance for Texas A&M to turn things up a notch here and make that Thanksgiving weekend game against the Horns even bigger than it's already going to be by surviving LSU here at home if they can. Laying now just 1.5, opened up a little bit more, 2.5 or 3 earlier in the week.
Yeah, and look, it's a very difficult place to play. Obviously, everybody knows that. Both of these places are really difficult. This is an intriguing one because there was a time, after that Notre Dame loss, we were like, A&M's got some quarterback issues, and I know they had some injuries at the position anyway, but they didn't have their quarterback situation wasn't great last year. It was largely the same. But LSU has really put together a nice run after that game again, and both these teams had mirror carbon copy starts to their season. Tough losses against another Power 5-ish. Notre Dame's not technically Power 5, but you get what I'm saying. Type team. I really have no feel in this one whatsoever. I can't figure out which team is for real and which team is kind of a fake. What does the Missouri win actually mean? If Missouri gets run by Bama, what does that Missouri win that A&M have actually mean? What does the Ole Miss win actually mean for LSU? Depending on so, I don't have a great feel on this. I know the quarterbacks are both. Nussmeier especially. He's an NFL kid. His dad coached in the league, and he's an NFL type quarterback eventually. I don't have a great feel in this one though.
John, this is – I don't want to say it's an elimination game because, look, whoever loses this game, they're only going to have one loss in conference, but they're going to be 6-2 overall. Their wiggle room will be next to nothing, if not completely removed altogether, despite the fact that you're talking about the 8th and 14th ranked teams in the country. This will loop back in just a second to our feelings on the conference as a whole, but – if this comes down to a quarterback battle and which quarterback makes fewer mistakes, I'm not a huge fan of either one of them in that situation, but I guess I'll land on Nussmeier begrudgingly.
Yeah, I think when you look at what Texas A&M did last week, they just kind of survived, right, against a Mississippi State team that, granted, did make a quarterback change and it seemed to be positive, but, I don't think he couldn't beat the starter, so he can't be that damn good. They let him have 3 touchdowns in a close game. Nussmeier throws that ball as effortlessly as anybody in the country, man. I know, there are a lot of great quarterbacks in the NFL. Shadour's in that discussion in terms of effort, how good he is. But Nussmeier slings that damn thing, man. And that's why you've seen this number come down. This opened at 3, 3.5, and it's down to 1, 1.5. Again, we're getting into the time of year, fellas, where my volume just honestly goes down. There are no secrets in week 9, right? Like everybody knows everything about every quarterback and every system and things like that. So I'm looking more at, who the big fades are. These two teams are really freaking good. So I think it's appropriately priced as a coin flip. I think, again, if I was forced to take one, I would take LSU because I like their offense a little bit better. But again, we've seen Texas A&M's defense stand up too. So I don't really feel great about either one of them. But if forced, I would take LSU. I know that's not a great answer for Twitter, right? Like I know that's not going to get clipped up, but I always try to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's indicative too of like you both said, just how closely these two teams are matched, right? There's a reason the number is what it is. There's a reason why it's so hard to handicap this one. There's a reason why it's very difficult to come down on one side or another. Back to the conference as a whole. Following the Texas and Bama losses last weekend that we started the show talking about, I mentioned it. There are no undefeated teams in the SEC. But 8 of them with 2 or fewer losses. At the same time, no SEC team has a 50% or better chance to make the playoff, to make the conference title game. Texas, LSU, Tennessee, Georgia, A&M, all somewhere between 30 and 49%. So when we look at the way the rest of this season may shake out for the SEC, how many teams do we think end up making the playoff? To begin with, I know we talked about 4 earlier in the show, John. Is that realistic? Do we think the SEC ends up stabilizing and a 5th team finds their way in? And is that 5th team maybe Bama if they can run the table?
Yeah. I mean, you start getting into, human condition at some point. I mean, and the committee is just so used to Alabama being there that, like, you do have to factor in some prejudice for Alabama football if they make it close. Like, if this is a situation where we get, okay, you mentioned the other candidate, like a BYU, right? If we get into a situation where it comes down to, a 1-loss BYU, a 2-loss, even a 3-loss Alabama, honestly, I would say. I mean, Bama's going to get the nod just because of what they've achieved, their brand, the viewership. We don't have to be naive, So I think absolutely five SEC teams I would still believe end up getting in. That would be my bet as of today.
Choppy, a 3-loss Alabama in the playoff over a, say, 1-loss conference championship game loser, like, I don't know, let's pick a team out of thin air, like an SMU, I don't know, in the ACC, or Kansas State in the Big 12.
Yeah, I think you're getting there. I think a 3-loss Bama is probably going to get in. The issue Bama's going to run into is what happens with what happens with Georgia the rest of the way. How much does the committee take into account those conference championship game losses? What if Georgia has 2 losses going in to play Texas in the conference championship game, and then they lose? They get a 3-loss. Are they going to get punished for losing to Texas, a team they already beat on the road? How's that going to factor into it? What happens with the A&M LSU loser? There's so because the loser has to either play Alabama, which is LSU, or they got to play Texas, which is A&M. I assume Tennessee is going to lose to Georgia, but if they win out, they're too. I mean, what's going to happen with that? And what if they were to get into the conference championship game and then lose? Like, are you going to punish them for losing?
Right.
I think it's a tough road for Bama to get in. I really do. I do think they have another loss to the schedule, and I just find it really, really difficult to put a 3-loss team in over a team that lost 1 game and losing their conference championship game, even though that shouldn't matter. I know that shouldn't matter, but I think the committee is going to find that difficult to do.
For what it's worth, Alabama's odds to win the SEC now after that second loss all the way out to 22-1. Going to be tough to leapfrog a lot of those 1-loss teams perhaps and get their way into the conference championship game if that were to happen. We'll see. Maybe the SEC continues to cannibalize itself. Let's get everybody our best bets and get out of here and enjoy the weekend of college football. Choppy, get us started. What do you got?
You know what? I am going to go, and I never thought I would do this. I never thought I would pick this, but I'm going to take Vanderbilt plus the 18-ish that they're getting against Texas. I'm taking the Commodores. They're still called the Commodores, right? The Doors. Give me the Commodores. Plus 18 and a half, whatever you can get against Texas at home. I like Vandy. Diego, baby, Diego.
Diego and Vandy. All right. I like it. Big number. John, what do you got?
Give me Texas minus 18. I'm just kidding. You guys know I don't play big games like this. We're going to Jonesboro, Arkansas, a.k.a. Jones Boogie. And we are taking the Arkansas State Red Wolves minus 7.5. Really simple here. Troy, I believe, truly is one of the worst teams in college football because Kennesaw State got a win last night over Liberty. So I think they can kind of remove themselves from the conversation. Troy's on his backup quarterback. They've been completely uncompetitive for the better part of 2 or 3 weeks now. They've had the injury to Crowder. He's done. He's gone for the season. Arkansas State, meanwhile, put 44 up on Southern Miss last week. They've got a really exciting quarterback there in Arkansas State. Now they're above 500, and now they can kind of start to smell a bowl. So you get this back in Jonesboro against a bad team. I think, you got to be ready for this to get to win number 5 and really get close to securing that bowl appearance, which is very important at a place like Arkansas State. So, look, I wish it was 7. It's not 7 anymore. It's 7.5. I don't think it matters. I think Arkansas State rolls in this one.
Arkansas State.
Butch Jones.
Jones Boogie.
It's against Troy, bro. It's not Butch Jones against Florida. Okay, it's not 2014.
That might be better against Billy Napier. Real quick, I'm going to go over. We talked about the effect of Big Ten teams having to travel. There's a good chance Oregon covers 21.5, but I'm not going to bet that. I'm going to go with the over 54.5. Oregon against Illinois. Dylan Gabriel going to make a little bit of history this weekend. 3 more passing touchdowns and 128 yards will move him into second all-time in FBS history in each of those categories because he's been playing for about a decade and a half now. So Oregon, Illinois, over 54.5. We'll come back. We'll break it all down next weekend and get you ready for some more big matchups. We do it every weekend, Friday nights and Saturday mornings, and always available wherever you get your podcasts. Right here on the BetQL Network. This has been BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker.
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
Sports handicapper Rob Brown.
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
Cycling all the top plays.
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
And one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3.
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game! We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it. I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.